somebody pinch me because I'm talking to Ginger Z right now. Like, what?
Yeah, I'm not a weather girl either, coincidentally.
Before we get into your upbringing, I want to tell a little story. I'm going to take you back to 2019. I'm a weather anchor. I start having panic attacks on air, live on television, out of nowhere. I have so much anxiety. I'm like, where do I go next? I feel lost. I feel confused. And on a whim, I email Ginger Z. And the next day, I'm meditating, trying to get a hold of my anxiety, and the phone rings. And Ginger Z calls. And you offer me advice. You look at my reel. You refer me to people. Somebody that is so incredibly busy took the time out of their day to help little old me. And not only just help me, but help me at a time that I felt so lost.
Yeah.
So I just want to thank you for being such a mentor to not only myself, but to so many aspiring journalists, aspiring meteorologists in our industry. It truly means so, so, so much to me.
Of course. Yeah, you're welcome. But I think, and not to take away from the experience, because everybody's experience with anxiety or with depression or with whatever we've run into is different. Everybody has one. And so coincidentally, I've fielded those calls or made those phone calls, made those connections multiple times because you're so not alone. And I think I hope that's part of what you got out of the advice was this is so normal. I wish it didn't have to be, but but it is. And you're just like joining the club,
Yeah.
Welcome to it.
Exactly. Well, let's step it back and let's talk about your upbringing.
Sure.
You grew up in Michigan, and I am also from Michigan as well. So we can talk about that. But tell me about your childhood.
Yeah, so I was born in California, but only because my mom was studying out there. And so my parents moved back to Michigan when I was pretty young, and both had kind of put down most of their roots there, even though my mom's a New Yorker. My dad's from the Netherlands, but like they had both met in Michigan. So we went back, we had a family, and we had kind of the beginnings of a, relatively normal growing up. And at first I would say it was just like suburban rural, West Michigan. And then as I grew up, I just found that after my parents divorced, I had this summer spent on Lake Michigan, and that's where I fell in love with weather. So, and I was just there on Lake Michigan, 3 miles away from the very spot that I fell in love with weather. So every time I get to go back and connect to that place, I'm able to remember why, because you can see, if you haven't been to Lake Michigan, it is looking like just like an ocean. You can see forever. And we even saw a shelf cloud coming across while we were there. And my kids were like, whoa. And they are about the age that I was when I fell in love with thunderstorms and waterspouts and everything that I saw that summer on Lake Michigan in the late 80s. And so that was kind of the impetus of why I found myself passionate and excited about weather. I don't know that I knew what I wanted to do necessarily. I just knew that I loved it. And then as I grew, I was always looking, because like as a kid, people are constantly, whether it's right or wrong, asking you, what are you going to do when you grow up? And I never thought to say, I would love to be a meteorologist, but I know that I had it in my head. I definitely did not want to be the person on TV, because to me, I was way too shy. I had no interest whatsoever. But I knew that I loved and was excited about weather. And then I saw the movie Twister when I was in high school. And that movie and Helen Hunt's character showed me that there was something that I could do and wanted to do, and that was chase tornadoes. And so that's really why I went to college for meteorology, because now I had this image, whether it was, Hollywood probably making something that wasn't real at the time, because mostly men were in that. But there have been women far before me, and there will always be, and that number keeps growing, thankfully. But I went to Valparaiso University because they had a storm chasing team, and I intended to go on and get my PhD and, work at a university and do research. That's really what I wanted to do. So that was growing up in West Michigan and how my career kind of began.
Interesting. So how did it pivot from off-air meteorology to on-air meteorology?
Yeah, I had done just because we had electives in high school, I had done a TV studio class. So I had some understanding, even though I was really uncomfortable with it, of what TV was. And I think that even solidified why I didn't want to do it because I felt really uncomfortable and shy and it wasn't right. So when I went to college, I had this kind of big wall up of saying, like, I am not doing that. But one of my professors, John Knox, he teaches now in Georgia, but he was so adamant about me trying broadcasting. He was like, I really think you'd be good at it. Every time you get up and we would do little debriefs about a forecast or whatever, he's like, you're such a good communicator, and it would kill me if you didn't go try this. So he said, just do an internship. If you hate it, you're out. That's all I'm going to do. And so he really pushed me into wanting to find that. And this is where I think if there's ever fate or something is supposed to happen, the only internship that I got a call back from was in Birmingham, Alabama, with a king in the weather industry named James Spann. And James is, if you don't know him, you got to go look it up, because he is, and still my mentor today, but constantly inspiring young meteorologist. And he really showed me that you can be a wonderful scientist, a great family person, involved in your community, and be a businessman all at the same time. And I thought, if I would have done an internship with anybody but him, I don't think I would have done it. But he was far too inspiring to pretend that I didn't want a little glimpse of what he was doing. And so when I got back from that internship, then I kind of started pivoting. I didn't study broadcasting. I didn't take any comms classes. I stuck with all meteorology. But along the way, I did more internships. I did some job shadows. And obviously, it all worked.
Yeah, it's interesting you say you went from more of a science background into the broadcast background, but yes. I think it started with that passion. It started with what was most important, right?
Oh, yeah. No, without that foundation of what I love, and that is the atmosphere, I don't know that I would have stuck around this long. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not, it's not like we're working construction and an extreme heat warning or anything, but it is not glamorous still to this day. When I'm in a hurricane, there is no bathroom, there's no food. We are days and days without sleep, if not weeks sometimes. And it's every holiday and everything forever. And so there's a lot of sacrifice and a lot of, if you're not in love with it, I don't think you last very long, because you really have to love the content. And I do. And that's the thing that brings me back every time, is the reminder that someone's paying me to do the very thing that I fell in love with, nearly 40 years ago.
Exactly. So can you tell me about your first job in local news?
Yes. And so when I was in college and I had gone through 2 internships, there was an audition for a PBS station in Maryville, Indiana. And now this wasn't a paid job. I still don't know how they got away with that, but whatever.
But still an audition.
It was an audition. And then I went to a job 2 days a week, or 3 sometimes, I think, and worked for free, because that's what you do. It wasn't even an internship. It was like an actual job. And that was my first time on local news. That's very local. And then when I graduated, I had that experience. I had been on TV then at PBS for 2 years. I had 3 internships. I really came out confidently. Like, if I don't get a job, I don't know who's going to. And at that time, we were sending VHS tapes of ourselves around. And I sent close to 100 VHS tapes, and I got 0 response. Like, not even one call. Nobody wanted me to be their meteorologist. And it was such a blow to my ego, to my, the rejection and that time in your life post-college, when you're supposed to know it all and you're supposed to be able to be an adult all of a sudden. And then now the clear path was far from clear. That was a really difficult time. So I took the time to look around and say, do I really want to do this again? I was questioning it. Like, maybe I should have gone to grad school and gone on my path. And then I got a job in radio. And that is one of those things that I didn't intend to do, but has been instrumental in my career, because it taught me how to tell a story without pictures. And in weather, that's pretty big. So I did this radio for almost a year, and then I got my first job in Flint, Michigan, the first paying job, I should say, on TV. And that was at WEYI in Flint, or it was really in Clio, Michigan.
And did it feel like a male-dominated industry, especially when you were first starting out?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just not even the industry, but the science, right? So even in school, I was one of 2 women in my graduating class. And those numbers have improved, as I said, but it is this evolution of how television and meteorology has gone. You also had this world of, at first it was these kind of aviation broadcast people. They're these nerds that got brought onto TV. And then they were like, this isn't working in the 60s. We got to bring in some fun. And so they brought in everything from puppets and animals to weather girls. And that transitioning away from that took a very long time. So not only was it a small number of women, but a small number of women that were meteorologists. And so it's been a long career of trying to come up against these old stereotypes and also bust through the men who, whether they were degreed or not, always kind of were given that confidence and belief and credibility, even if they didn't have it. So yes, I have always felt like it's male dominated, and we know it is. But now I'm seeing more and more chief female meteorologists, and I love watching the progression.
How many times have you been called weather girl in your career?
Constant. And I've reacted differently over the couple of decades. At the beginning, it was so disappointing to me because I had worked so hard. Why are you calling me a weather girl when I am a meteorologist? I worked for this degree. I took the tests. I'm degreed. I have a seal. I have everything that I'm supposed to do, much like, you don't say law girl when it's a female lawyer. You don't say doctor girl when it's a woman who's a doctor. And I just didn't understand why we were here. Now, over time, I've given people a lot more grace, and I usually help to educate them because I'm realizing it takes people a very long time to culturally and societally change the way that we are. And I maybe as I get older, any term girl, I'm like, yes, I am a girl, a woman, but also happen to have this. And so I use it as a educational moment, usually to do that. But my husband recently has got a very funny story. He's in television too, and he's done outstanding work, and he's wonderful. But when we're out, a lot of times, and when he was alone, he was at the grocery store, and this woman puts her sunglasses down and up and down and up and down and up, and she goes, "I know you." And he's thinking, "Oh, you know me from TV or whatever," because he gets recognized plenty too. And she's like, "You're married to the weather girl." This was like 2 weeks ago. And he says, and even he has now been conditioned to be like, actually, it's meteorologist, but let me tell you why, and
Yeah.
it's very fun.
Is it wild that your husband also works in local news?
Yeah.
I guess it's not a competing station because it's local versus national, but still, is that weird?
It's, to me, it's been the best marriage of our careers because of that. So he has a much better understanding than a lot of people that I had dated prior to what the requirements are, to what, the sacrifices are, and to really help me, develop my stories and the things that he's strong at, we can cross over many times and help each other with. So I think it was a necessity to be married to someone in the business. And he's done a lot of other shows. He had a couple of nationally syndicated shows. He's worked on the entertainment side, which is far less secure and was for a very long time. And so he's shown me a little glimpse into that. Even the parts that we would imagine are glamorous outside of news. News has a nice steadfastness to it, right? Like the news is always there. So it's been nice to have that perspective as well.
Yeah, that's why a lot of couples from news do become couples because they can relate to each other in that
Very
way.
much. Yeah, and have sympathy and understanding.
Yeah, a lot of it. Exactly. Where did you go after your first market?
Yep.
We talked about your first market. Can you talk about where you went next?
Yeah, so after Flint, I got a job in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is my hometown. So it was so nice. I was working at like the #1 station, the one I grew up watching, Wood TV. They're just they're like iconic in West Michigan still to this day. They're really that strong. And but I worked as one of 6 meteorologists. Like most stations have 3 or 4 best, but we had 6 because the chief was supposed to retire and then he didn't. And anyway, I ended up being kind of extra. So that's the first job where I got a lot of experience reporting because they just didn't need me at doing weather, and then anchoring. So that was the first time I had ever anchored, and I really got time doing all of the stuff I didn't normally do. It was also the job where I covered my first big storm, and that was Hurricane Katrina. So now we're coming up on this 20-year anniversary of my first big storm, and thinking back to who I was and what type of meteorologist and reporter I was then to who I am now. And the natural disasters, the biggest of our time, I've been able to be there front and center, and get this unique perspective that other people don't get. And I've been in hundreds at this point, and so I've learned so much, and I hope that as a society, we are also learning so much. And I'm actually writing a book right now with National Geographic on just that, like how weather changed history and how much we have or have not learned.
Wow. And you went from Grand Rapids to...
And then I was in Chicago. So I worked at WMAQ, which is the NBC station in Chicago, for 5 years. And I did weekend overnights and filling in for like a month at a time. And then during those first couple of years, they asked me, hey, do you want to start moonlighting for MSNBC Early Today Show and Today? I was like, yes. So I would fly to New York and fill in for Bill Cairns, who was having babies and doing a bunch of stuff. He had a lot going on. So for a couple of years, I was just there during holidays, or here in New York, working all of the different shows that I possibly could. And then at the end of that, I very much wanted to step in and help them out and like come over to New York to do the network side of things, but they just didn't see it yet. And so while I was visiting, then I didn't have an agent until then. I had hired one, and then they said, why don't you just meet with ABC? They're not looking necessarily. And I met with ABC and I got hired on the spot. So that was pretty amazing because I don't think either of us expected it, but it was exactly where I should have been. And I had worked at NBC affiliates my entire time and owned stations. And so I really didn't even know what the name of World News Tonight was. Like I had paid no attention to the other guys across the street. So coming over here, I had a lot to learn. I read Barbara Walters' books and I dove in head first. And I've thankfully been able to swim here for a very long time.
Wow, you said you were hired on the spot?
Yeah, that doesn't happen.
What was that conversation like?
Yeah, so I had interviewed and I knew it was going well because like when you stay in a building for more than an hour, right, you start to be like, okay, so they want me to meet somebody else. And they kept saying, I'd love for you to meet this person. I'd love for you to meet this person. And they were also kind of procrastinating because the woman who was the talent person at ABC at the time had been pushed and she was very busy. So while I was between these meetings of you should meet this person, you should meet this person, I kept sitting in the same spot. And this guy kept walking past over and over. And he would be like, hello, you good? Is that somebody helping you, I hope? He's very nice. And I should have done my research to know that was the president of ABC. So on hour 5 or whatever, he saw me sitting in the same spot. He's like, why don't you come talk to me? And he's like, you're Ginger, right? And we started talking and then we went to his office and I noticed it was giant with huge windows. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I saw on the door president and I was like, okay. So we got to talking and he asked me a question I feel like everybody should probably be asked because he's still such a mentor and a visionary. He said, what are we doing wrong in weather at ABC? And I had done my research and I said, well, it's not just you, but all of the networks are damage chasing. I've been storm chasing since I was in college. I can get you there before, which is the responsibility of a meteorologist because our models and our forecasting is so good now. I can get you right there. And we should be telling people, in Cincinnati, tomorrow is going to be a deadly day, and that's what we ended up doing that year. And then I can take you through the storm itself and show you the tornado on TV, and then we can do the damage and the stories like you guys always do. But I felt very much, really, because again, I didn't expect to get a job. I think I was just talking as if I would, like this is what you're doing wrong and this is what I think I could bring to the table. And he said, I want you to do that. And I was like, great. And so then the talent person came in and he said, hire Ginger. I was like, wait, what? So it was and I followed through. And I think that's why a big part of my passion for what I love and for he saw that in me. And then that part has been my through line and the fabric of who I've become in my career.
Ooh, I have the chills. So do you remember your first day at officially Good Morning America?
Yeah. I started on the weekends, but they had brought me in. And one of my favorite stories to tell is they had told me, okay, well, your weather producer is going to meet you. And I was like, weather producer? Like in local news, you never have a producer. You always produce your own stuff and your own forecast and your own graphics. And I said, no, thank you. I'm good. Like I've always done this myself. And I felt very much like I didn't need that. And they said, no, you really need to meet him. And he knows the graphic system. I'm like, I know the graphic system, right? I was feeling very cocky, I guess. But his name was Gerard. He was outstanding. He was the only meteorologist that was at the network at all, on air, off air. Like he was it. And him and I hit it off. We had a freelancer, Max, who also was then switched with, he did the weekdays and Gerard did the weekends with me. And that first day, I remember being like, oh, there's a lot going on here. I have a lot more to do. And within 3 days, I was on the road for the next 2 years. And then I realized not only do I need Gerard and Max, but we need a bigger team. We started doing weather the way I wanted to do weather. And to do that, I didn't just need a weather producer, I needed many weather producers. And so we started building our off-air meteorology team. And that's something that still to this day, they all work with me. And I'm so proud because we've built this thing that I don't think any network had ever had. And I think we do it better than anyone, from coming from very little to now. So it's been a joy to be able to bring, this next level of weather.
Well, that's a great segue. You've covered and been on the field for pretty much anything from hurricanes to tornadoes to all severe weather. Was there ever a moment when you thought, maybe I put myself in too much danger?
No, there's never been a point where I feel like our choices were something, because I never want to become a part of the problem. There have been times where I've been directed by police or firefighters or whomever the first responders are that has put us in a bit more danger than I would like to do, because sometimes even their information is delayed from what's really happening. And this is no knock to that. That's something that in communications and emergency management, we see time and again that needs to be improved. But in Hurricane Sandy, for example, we were done shooting everything. The water had already been coming up, 12 hours prior to the storm making landfall. And we were in Atlantic City where it would make landfall. And the water was so high at the south, or maybe we're on the north end of it. I can't remember which side, the north end of it, that I was like, we got to go. Like, we got to get to our hotel. Our hotel was on the highest spot in Atlantic City, which is like 7 feet higher than the others. But hey, 7 feet's big. And we tried to get back on this road and they were like, nope, road's closed, you need to go the other way. And I said, no, the storm surge is already there. Like, we're done. Like, this is it. The water's already coming up. We don't want to drive through water. And they said, too bad, this road's closed, and they didn't have the information that the water was already so high. So there were points during that navigating out of that situation where I felt scared, but again, not by our choice.
Right, exactly. Is there a story moment that you covered that really just shook you or stands out to you?
Oh my gosh, so many. Hurricane Michael was, a storm that was in Mexico Beach, Florida, so in the panhandle of Florida. A lot of people don't remember it, and I always wonder why, because it was the last Category 5 hurricane we had, and prior to that, it was Andrew in 1992. But I also think that goes to show you how little category means to people,
Yeah.
and it should mean little, because some tropical storms can be far more deadly because of inland flooding, right? So it's kind of good and bad, but people don't remember it, but I do and never will forget, because I was in Mexico Beach, Florida. I had talked for decades about water and how powerful it is, and how, I'd done full 3D graphics based on people's descriptions of how homes rip off of their foundation within seconds of the water coming up, and then they roll down the street and they get shredded by things. And really, we had seen some video, but I had never seen it in person in real time. As I'm on TV and we still had broadcastability for about 10 minutes, I'm watching homes do exactly what people had told me they were doing, ripped off of their foundation, bobbing down the street, and then like 3-story homes just shredding and all of the debris. And it all happened, watching that surge come up in a Cat 5 with those winds pushing the ocean onto land within 30 seconds to 3 minutes. The absolute, washing machine that was that hurricane, that one will never escape me. But Hurricane Ian, another one that sticks with me. I was in Helene and Milton most recently. Just the only ones I actually didn't stand in because I was pregnant were like the year of Harvey and Irma, because it would have looked really weird with a fully pregnant woman standing there. And I always blame my youngest, Miles. I'm like, see, you're my hurricane.
Well, we talk about forecasting. We talk about these storms. We talk. But when we're there, actually there on the ground, you just gain this huge perspective, right?
It is. There's nothing like learning from the experience. And I always say, like, a meteorologist who hasn't chased tornadoes, to understand what a radar looks like in your hand to what the sky looks like. It's like a doctor who has never worked on a cadaver or a patient. You don't want someone going into surgery that just looked at a book once or 40 times or any times, right? Having that real experience and the touch and the smell and the feel is so instrumental in how you forecast the next event. And so not only that, but it takes you out of the science and puts you into the humanity. So because I've been there to watch how it impacts humans, because storms are not about science. Yes, they are, of course, but they're about humans and how they impact a human life. And that's where we see I see a big change in how I reported. And then even more so, I always say my why changed and why I do what I do. From science, in Katrina, I was just like, oh, wow, I can't wait to see the storm surge. And then within 30 seconds, I was like, oh my God, this is about people. This is wild. And then, Hurricane Michael, I met all of these people afterward. And you always ask them, well, why didn't you leave? And every person I met said, I didn't have the money, I don't speak English, I don't have a vehicle. It was like a shock of privilege and how privilege plays such a role in a lot of these storms. And then, why aren't we doing a rescue before the rescue? Why can I be in a place that's safe, but these people floated for 6 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours, and thankfully lived, and other people didn't? So those questions start to come up. And then it's like, now, how do we communicate a forecast to its best of its ability and get those people out of there? You see something like the Texas flooding, and that's a question that relationship between emergency management and information, the Buffalo blizzard in 23, that was just should not have happened in this modern society, but it did. And so those are the stories that motivate me now to keep doing what I do.
When women come to you with their reel, what stands out to you as a great meteorologist?
That's a great question. So I would love to say that it's all about science and about what you say and how intelligent it is, but that's not our medium, and that's not the world. So I do think that someone who understands that we're entertaining while informing is someone that stands out to me. If you know your stuff and you're passionate, that's going to come through. It doesn't have to be over the top on that end. And so having the ability to be relatable, to be likable, and like, that's the hard part and this is the part that I talk to them a lot after. I might like your tape or your reel, but a news director who has a different taste won't. And that's okay. And like, the big thing that I wish I could go back and teach myself early is we all have preferences. Like, there are actors or actresses or musicians who they just don't like sound right to you, or they just, like, when you watch them act, you're like, ew, I don't like that. Like, it's, I'm not going to write them on social media and let them know, but like, it's just, I'm not going to watch their show or whatever because it's not my preference. I wish I understood that that's exactly how people will react to me, both on the, reel, like on a reel, but that's the thing you can't change, is the part that you want to look great off the top, the best you can look, but there are a lot of people who are going to be like, I don't like what she looks like. Okay. and then you want to show off that you have intelligence and that you know what you're talking about. Great. And then I always say, have like a moment of entertainment or some sort of reaction, because you also don't work alone. In no job are you there on a wall all by yourself all the time. So I like to see that, and I like to see people outside. That's one thing. If they've only been in a studio, it's that same question, like, do they really have that experience outdoors? It's wonderful to have that incorporation. Some jobs don't give you those opportunities, but I would say always fight for them.
That's great advice, by the way. Switching gears, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about mental health, because that has been such a large part of your journey.
Yes.
You've talked about your battle with anorexia, having an abortion, being raped, attempting suicide not just once, but twice. I first want to ask, were you scared to come forward and publicly talk about all of this?
Yeah, it's quite a trauma resume, but so many people have their own trauma resumes, and it's not something that we do regularly, and it's not that I think everybody should be carrying them around and sharing them everywhere. So yes, I think originally when I went to write the book, I didn't know I was going to write this type of book. I had no idea what I just went to write a baby book about weather, honestly. I thought that I was pregnant, and I had looked for baby books about weather, and it was like, oh, I could handle that, but I'm not a writer. And as I started talking talking to this editor, Wendy Lefcon, who's wonderful at Disney Publishing. She really brought it out of me, the stories that meant more than anything I've talked about in my career. And it's strange because the storms that I've covered got me here and got me to this place. But this part of my career, the mental health, you know, proliferation of it within my career and who I've become in the mental health community, that was my purpose, I'm pretty sure. Like, I am supposed to be there. And so at first, was it hard? Yes. There was the night that my book was supposed to actually go to print. And I said to my husband, I'm like, I made a big mistake. I'm letting everybody know. I am so far from perfect. But as soon as it came out and I started hearing from other people, both, I think, myself and even my bosses, because I did this before it was as popular to do. I think we were all very nervous. And then when it finally came out, it was like, oh, I don't even know if I shared enough. And that's why I wrote another book, because I knew there was so much more that I could connect to people on.
How
So,
freeing
yes,
did
it
that
was.
feel?
It felt, and it's healing, right? It's the most ultimate form of healing. And the transparency and the responsibility of continuing my own personal mental health care has been another part of healing that I didn't expect, because I can't be going around and speaking to people about all of these tools I've used if I'm not still learning those tools. And so, as much as I've been a conduit of atmospheric and climate science, I have become a conduit of mental health science. And so as I learn more and I get involved in these communities and the doctors and the people who are doing the hard work on this, I feel like I have a better understanding, and I also know how to communicate science. And so it's a nice way for me to use my skill that yes, it was made for telling people about, hail versus sleet, but you can do that with DBT therapy versus talk therapy, and have good ways of giving an analogy and helping people, because I've been through that storm. And so it's been a really freeing, but yes, I'd say it's almost like, in a good way, put me in a forward motion to always find more healing, right? Like, I can't relapse. I'm not allowed.
Yeah. And as we both are in this industry, I'm sure we both have photos of us in beautiful dresses with big smiles, and that is a far cry from what we are dealing with internally.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about this because in one of your books, you said, too many times that smile got bigger as I got sadder. And we hear it all the time when somebody is depressed or takes their life, but they looked so happy.
Yeah.
Of course they did.
Of course they did. I almost think sometimes, and that you can't make a general statement because I don't think there's anything to prove this, but anecdotally, those stories that I've heard of parents who have lost their child, or they really didn't know. Because a lot of times the acting or the lying to oneself and then to others was so big, and the shame that comes along with the feelings that they were having was so important for them to hide, that it kept isolating them more and more and more and more. And that is something that, when I look at those pictures of those early days in Flint, and in Grand Rapids and even in Chicago, where I was struggling so severely, and I was so afraid to let people know, because that felt like the opposite of writing a book about it. It felt like I need to make sure not one person knows anything about me that's really in here, because that would be devastating. I thought that was the end. And I hope that, and I know that our society, we've gotten to a better place about being okay with mentioning panic attacks or anxiety or depression. And that's good. I think we've made it a good step, but we're so far from understanding it and understanding what to do. And that's the part that I want. Everyone's like, oh, get rid of the stigma. I'm like, I feel like the stigma's done with that part. It's like, we have to work on, when I start talking about going to the psych ward, then people are still like, you did what?
Right.
I'm sorry, what? And so there's still a stigma on the thing that if someone went to the, get alcohol rehabilitation or drug rehabilitation, and they go to Betty Ford or to one of these other, we say, good for them. But like, when I say I went to the psych ward, nobody right away goes, well, good for you. They're like, what was wrong? Oh no. Yeah. Because you really needed that. And it's like, yes, actually. And so the stigma needs to come away with not only, oh gosh, what did they do, but now good for them. But if they're not there yet and they haven't gotten themselves to that place, realizing I couldn't get there alone. I was not going to get to that psych ward alone. I had to have people on my team around me that knew what to do and where to go, and how privileged I am that I had that. My mom, my cousin, they were the ones who basically and actually physically took me there because they were afraid. I was afraid. And this was a place where it was like, okay, this is the last stand. It shouldn't get that late. If you've had suicidal ideation, that's a serious, serious thing. You need to be taken seriously to a hospital, just, if that's the closest place. And usually that's a good funnel to get you to the right place next, because that's the big question is like, if somebody breaks their leg and we see them, we're like, oh, get an ambulance, or we take them to the hospital. If somebody comes to you and says, I'm having a mental break, or I'm having this, or I'm having suicidal ideation, you're like, oh, well, have you gotten help? Like, people don't know what to do. They get clammed up. Take them to the hospital. That's not something to mess with. And so usually that then helps you to get funneled to the right place. And that's the first time that I was getting the right type of therapy. The whole therapy I'd gone through for all the other stuff was the wrong type of therapy. No wonder it didn't help. And so being able to have that, and this is something that's quite broken in a lot of parts of our world, in the United States especially, we don't have a lot of care in rural areas. There's a lot of room to grow, but even in the places where it is good, people aren't getting the help that they need. So that's my hope, is that we change the stigma of like, okay, well, where do I go and how do I help this person? How do I pick them up like I would if they had a broken leg?
Yeah, our mental health is as important as our physical health.
Yeah, more.
Exactly. Are there any tools that you utilize today to help with anxiety or depression? Like, do you have any go-tos in your toolbox?
Yeah, meditation has become much larger, and I always say it's like the pursuit of happiness was what our foundation of our country is based on, but I always instead frame it as the pursuit of peace, because pursuing happiness is fleeting, right? Happiness is just one feeling we're going to have today multiple different times, but we're also going to be sad and we're going to be frustrated and we're going to be upset. And then in those moments where the feelings last longer, I am constantly asking myself, is this going to matter a year from now? Am I going to remember this? Half the time, I'm not going to remember it. And I've been much better putting meditation with that. And I still do the personal training of my brain, which is my therapy, every week, or at least every other week if I have something. But I try to not miss that one check-in. That trifecta of putting those things together with the basics and the really boring part of like good sleep and nutrition. I know nobody wants to hear that. So that trifecta of meditation and the therapy, and then all of the foundational work, and then also like the letting go of things. I've been practicing that so long. And then I'd say at the middle of it all is writing. And so that's something that I always encourage people to do if they haven't started yet. It doesn't mean you have to write a book that everybody sees, but being honest with yourself and having that journey written down, even if it's just notes, even if it's just how you're feeling that morning, and that check-in of how you're feeling doesn't have to be like this serious journal that has a cover and all of this stuff. Having that has helped me to flip the whole situation, often with gratitude and with the intention. And I always say, I've done yoga for a long time, and they would always be like, what's your intention for this class? And I'd be like, I don't know, like I want to have better flexibility, right? Like I didn't understand it at first, but now I've gone deeper on what that intention is for the day. And that's, if you have that, it's kind of a meditative moment to come back to each moment. So, or each part of the day, when you have a flip of an emotion or something that's throwing you a little bit, I'm able to say, is this going to matter a year from now? What was my intention today? Okay. And usually I can get back to a peaceful feeling surrounding whatever that emotion is, and move through my day. So those are all tools that I regularly use. And there's a lot of other things that I'm constantly learning. And that's the other thing, is realizing I don't have it down, right? Like we're all still learning through this process of life. And that's the important part, and the part that I think people need to understand. Like disaster, post-disaster, I've learned a lot. The community that comes up, and you always hear like that cliche line in local news, like, then the community came together. And I always thought that was so weird. Why do we always say that? Because it's true. The best of humans come out, and you meet neighbors that you never did, and you're like, oh my gosh, what are you doing with insurance? We survived this thing. You have this community created in mental health, if we do that and we say, hey, I had a tornado too, a tornado of life, right? This happened to me. Now we've created the community and we can share ideas. And that is something that we're missing across the board in life, but especially post mental health or mental breaks or whatever has happened.
What is the day in the life of Ginger, who is not forecasting the weather? She has no assignments. What is a day for her look like?
Well, I think I just lived a couple of them in Michigan. I love water and I love the beach and I love, getting up and walking and being with my children and like connecting to the earth and to the environment. And I think that's really missing in all of our everydays. And that's something that I would seek out if I ever and when I do have time. And then because I love weather, I think I still would have like the hobby of forecasting, and I probably even more so into like I can see in retirement how I'm going to fully be the mostly men, but some women that write me and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I've got my weather system, and this is what it is." And so I can see that will still always be a big part of who I am and why I'm interested in my environment right here, but also how it connects to the rest of the planet. And then I just love, my husband and I talk about it all the time. Whenever people are like, oh, I had a time away from my kids, we don't understand, because I travel so much for work or because I have plenty of time away from my family that I didn't ask for. Anytime that I can be like really with them and present with them and having, fun, good time, bad time, whatever it is, even just sitting and doing Legos is like my favorite thing, is to just spend time with them.
Oh, has your perspective changed at all since having 2 children when it comes to your career?
Yes, 1,000,000%. They taught me how to say no. They gave me a reason, but I wish I would have understood that prior. And that's something that people often will say, like, find an old picture of yourself. And I think even more important is find a video. If you have a video, I didn't think I had any for a long time. And then we found this like treasure of this VHS tape at my dad when he was moving. And I had a real change in the value of myself and how much I am worth and how my voice matters and how lovable I am. And I think children give you that. They give you this purpose outside of what, my career was everything. That's all I had. Even when I was just married with my husband, we were both so driven. We were both so, and not to say that we weren't important and aren't important to each other. We are critically important, but it was just different. And then the kids come in and you realize I have way greater purpose. And what that helped me do, especially with this video that I then found, was I often will say to myself, how would I coach my child through this? What would I say to my kid if they were coming up against this thing that went wrong or wasn't perfect or was whatever it is, this hardship of life? And you give so much more grace to another person, especially your child. And so why don't you deserve that? Right? And so you're able to see, and because they look like you or sound like you or act like you have an even stronger connection to this. And I often think, oh, you poor thing, you've got such a long life. And all I wish I could do is just like surge all of this wisdom and like put it into them, but they have to learn a lot of it on their own too. And so it's that combo of having to sit back and be like, oh no, he's going to have to go through that. But then realizing like that's the beauty of life, and like finding that, but most importantly, finding the value in myself through them.
Yeah, and you have to go through parenthood to actually experience it, because people can tell you before you have a kid all these things like, wow, it's the most purposeful thing, or it's the best thing and hardest thing. And you're like, yeah, like I'm sure it is. But then you have a kid and you're like, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the one thing, too, we can all connect on, right? Like everybody is at least a child of someone, if not having children of their own. So that one thing is it's the through line of being human. And there's something very special about that.
So let's talk about your next career jump and the trajectory of your career.
So I think we're all in everybody said from the day that I got into TV's dying. Everyone's been saying that for the last 25 years. I don't think I ever bought in 100%. Like, I understand, especially on a local level, how important news is and how important it is to have someone who you trust to be, especially in weather, to be able to disseminate that information. Even robots and AI, there's really not much that I think replaces that. How we are getting that information across is now changing more rapidly than it ever has. And I really do believe we're seeing an end of an era. But I try to get excited about the beginning of what that next part looks like. And so I don't know about you and how you consume information, how you consume entertainment and information, because all of it's kind of a mishmash and there's so much out there right now. So I get excited about what role I could end up playing in this next evolution and what that might look like. And I also think that this is the point in my career where I don't have to always be on. I think a lot of actors, not that that's what we do, but a lot of actors get to their director phase where they're like directing and producing. And I always wondered, why do they do that? Like, and now I fully understand there are projects I want to be involved in, but I don't want to be the front of, or I'd like to, help other people and encourage them, but also put my expertise kind of on the back end. And so there are a couple projects that I'm interested in doing. I think we're all grasping in the best way for what comes next and how we reach the most people. Social media overtook officially now, according to, I think, a Reuters poll, the way that people get news. Number one way is social media. And so I'm in a constant race with everybody else to figure out how do we get the good information to find the algorithm? How do we get the trusted voice to actually have a voice? And I think we will all watch that. Who knows? But I'm excited to be a part of it.
How do you approach work when you're faced with skepticism of climate science?
Mm-hmm. This has been the constant, right? Climate science. And we've actually come quite far in people being not just ready for it, but wanting it. Now they're hungry for it. Not everybody. There are plenty of haters and denialists and all of the things and like the trolls. But I've got a real treasure trove that I've created this whole, I have a YouTube series called Climate A to Z, Z-E-E. And that's kind of my go-to bookmarks that I used to just send.
I love them, by the way.
Thank you.
If you haven't seen them, check them out.
Yes,
they are the best.
Yeah, please do. Because it's the question that everybody asks over and over and over, or it's like the common playbook of a denialist. And so it's an answer to all of those. And it's me just going through life and explaining to you how simple the answer is. Why, oh yeah, whatever happened to the ozone layer? It's like, actually, thanks for bringing it up. That was a huge way that the world came together and healed the ozone. And we're not there yet. It takes time, just like it would to change greenhouse gas emissions. They baked in for a while. But hey, if we make a big effort and change it all, this is it. So I look at climate science just like I've done meteorology, because weather is climate and climate is weather. They don't work independently. And it's no different. I just share data. I share science, and that's it. There is no agenda. It's just like, hey, here's this thing, and here's the truth about this thing. And you think it's this way, but, here's this. And so I'm able, and what I've learned is people don't necessarily, it got politicized terribly in the late 90s, early 2000s, and that's where this divisiveness comes from. But if you just break it down to the very basics of what we know, and more importantly, what we don't know, people start to open up, and they're like, oh, okay, so there are things, believe me, there's plenty we don't know, but I'm going to share with you what we do know. And that has helped me to tell these stories and come up against, I'd say it's funny because I got an email right before I left for vacation, another one. They're like, how much do they pay you to not talk about climate change? And I'm like, what? Are you? Usually I get it the other way around. I'm like, okay. And it very much, wow. I'm glad that I had the time in my career where it was all about how much they hated my dress. That was really simple. But that was a subjective thing. And I'm realizing this, even though science is not subjective, it evolves and it changes. And so people need to be brought up to the latest up-to-date stuff. And so this person doesn't realize I do an entire segment. And for 20 years, I've been committed to telling climate science. I need to help inform them. Yeah.
Before we get into rapid fire, I have one last question. My podcast title is called I Am Not a Weather Girl. And of course, we're both meteorologists, but my title is much more than that. It's also that so many times our identity is tied to what we do instead of who we are. And you said in your book, your Chiron, Ginger Z, underneath that title. My name is Stephanie Weaver. I'm a meteorologist, but I'm also a friend, a wife. I'm a parent. I'm a passionate, creative, kind person. Today, Ginger Z, what does your Chiron lower third,
Oh boy.
the bar on the TV screen, say?
Yeah, it's long. It's really long, which is great because that's how it's always been. It just, I didn't realize I had the value of sharing all the parts of me. And I think that's the beauty, is that I think being a mother and a wife and uh, a human on this planet that happens to love science and is a conduit of weather and climate data, but also a lover of being a conduit of mental health science, and a lover of like all things exercise and health and wellness, and like huge advocate for sleep, and like that's what I'm constantly working on. And if I am obsessed with anything right now, it's sleep. And then the best part, and like I haven't worn or I haven't purchased new clothing in more than 3 years, and talking about the impacts of that to the environment. And so the lower third of that Chiron is a constantly evolving addition of all of the things of who you are and what, but it also it can't encompass all of it. It's like that's the perfect reason why we all have to get to know each other, because it's about the connection that we have. You can't put that in your lower third. You can't explain that unless you have the connection. And so it goes well beyond the part that you see even listed in a very long Chiron.
Yes, I love that you say it's long, because it's supposed to be long. It's not supposed to be diluted to one simple term.
Yeah, and we still do it every time I have to ask, because that's what we do for TV. I feel it's like not the appropriate time to ask them, but like, what's your title? And I'm like, not that I think that that's who you are. Tell your name, what's your title? But I know you're more than that.
Do you have time for rapid fire?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay. Fill in the blank. If I weren't a meteorologist, I would be.
I love like bartending and throwing weddings. So some sort of like wedding place.
Ooh, like a wedding planner?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I'm the planner, but I'm definitely the venue and the putting it all together, like the project manager of it, but not the actual like, wedding party. I'd need a helper in that.
Your coffee order?
Right now is just with a little half and half, but if I'm really splurging, I'll do a cappuccino.
Nice. Your favorite travel destination?
I mean, I love Lake Michigan, and we just got back from there, but if I had to choose one that I'd like to go back to because I loved it so much, it would be Hawaii. And my sister lives in Kauai now, so we need to get there.
Oh, I'm going to Hawaii in October. I'm going to Maui, and I'm so excited. It's my first time.
Yeah, it's so good.
Your favorite restaurant?
Locally,
ooh, I want to know this.
Yeah.
Although I don't know if you want to give all your secrets away.
There's a place outside of New York City in Spark Hill, New York, that is called Roost. And it hits it out of the park every single time that we've been there. So I'll name them.
Something people often get wrong about you?
I think they don't think I have fire. Like they haven't seen that part yet. And so they just think I'm nice, and I'm not.
In what ways, Ginger?
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
The last movie, TV show, or book you watched and loved?
Oh. Well, I'm reading, I read, oh gosh, I've read a couple books. Al Pacino's book recently. I read, and I loved that. That was fun because I listened to it in his voice. And so that was, yep. And then my husband and I are watching You. We're very late to the party, but I've enjoyed that. And we had Jenna Ortega on this morning, and she's in one of the seasons there. So it was nice to connect that. And also The Gilded Age. We cannot get enough.
A snapshot of an ordinary everyday moment that gives you true joy?
It's getting the kids off the bus. Because I don't get to be there in the morning, I love the rundown. And unlike like a lot of people will say, oh, my kids don't tell me anything about school, especially our youngest, he is just jabber. He will not stop talking. We get all the details.
Is he going to be a journalist?
Yeah, he definitely needs to do something where he talks.
If you could switch lives with one person for a day, who would it be?
Oh my gosh. I think I would want to do something. Oh boy, that's really hard. That's a good question. I would want to learn something about another part of the world. I would want to like switch to, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like a world leader or someone, but like just get perspective of how someone lives in Ukraine right now, or you know what I'm saying? Because like we can hear and read headlines about these
Yeah.
places and have gratitude for what we have, but I think unless you experienced it, I don't know that you would know that feeling or know that connection to those people.
In your industry, you've set the bar so high. Are there people that you look up to today that inspire you?
I mean, I mentioned James Spann earlier, but he just did what I think we see. I keep saying, oh, I don't know what that next evolution is going to look like of how we broadcast and how we get information across. He has been thinking about this for 10 years. And like always, I'm going to be learning from him because he's now the head of the Alabama Weather Network, which I think will take over for how people get information because he's utilizing what he has gained in under credibility and the state of Alabama, knowing him well and finding him as important information. And he's going to bring it to them in an app. And I think that that is something that I'm constantly learning from. And then I'd say the people I work with here, you know, I get master classes every day. I watch Robin Roberts do her job. I'm in the same building as The View and Kelly and Mark. And like, there's so many people, if you just look around, that are doing it. But that's the funny part is like this, you know, chief meteorologist in Birmingham, Alabama. I think he's ahead of everybody. And I love learning from him.
Yeah. Do you ever pinch yourself when you're walking in that building like, this really is my life?
Yeah, we got a new building now, and so I feel like it's the bathrooms are nice, which is really you know, most stations are just like not
Yes.
what you expect, and they're
Yes.
usually pretty run down. That's what we were with for a long time. But no, just whenever when I used to pull into Times Square, and even down here, it's like getting into these neighborhoods, these like classic Manhattan. It was always just from a movie for the longest time. And now I've lived here for 14 years, and it is unbelievable that I'm able to do this job in this place in the world.
One thing you're deeply grateful for right now?
My garden, the ability to have food that we create in the backyard and that we're connected to. That's something that I'm really passionate about, and I could see myself in the world where I'm, you know, if I didn't say bartender and wedding, I would have said regenerative rancher. That's my other next job.
Well, and that's a luxury in New York City.
Yeah, and it's having any space beyond a tomato is good, but we're building and building and building, so it's really nice to have that.
Last question. If you could go back in time to when you first started your career, what piece of advice would you give yourself?
I would say it doesn't matter. Everything that you're worried about in your career, like I really can't think of something that there were so many nights I lost sleep because I thought, well, that's going to end me. You know, that's going to end my career. Even the ones where there was a story in Chicago when I was in Grand Rapids and I had gone down to kind of secretly interview in Chicago, and my news director in Michigan was so angry. And I thought, well, this is the end, you know, like this is where my career dies. And it actually was just where it began because all of that attention and basically I got into a newspaper saying, is she coming to the Windy City? It was really weird. That attention then got me that next job. And then the next, you know, like the interest just rolled. And so I think I would love to go back and tell myself, like, chill out. It's unless you're like really not showing up to work or something, right? Like you're doing great. And these little things that feel so big are not at all.
Chill out, and yet you wanted to get to the network level by 30, right?
Yeah, but that's the thing is I think I had that as such a goal, which is wonderful to have goals. But I now as a parent, you can say to my older son is so much like me, and I see him being so hard on himself and realizing how I might have even slowed myself down by being that way because I was so worried and I was so attentive to everything that I was annoying. And I was like, you know, there were many times where I don't know that I was as like attractive to a future employer because I was still the girl in the front of the class, like too much. Like, chill out.
Well, Ginger, I obviously could go on and on and on, but you are the real deal. Even in my meteorology classes, the professors talked about you. You come up constantly on this podcast as being someone people look up to. So I am just honored that you even gave me the opportunity to ask you these questions over this hour. It really means a lot to me. So thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. And, call anytime.
And I would say, where can people find you? But everybody knows where you're at already.
I'm trying to be all over, but I'm just at Ginger_Z most places.